Okay, our guest for today on the podcast is Joy de Berker, and Joy is someone who met anthroposophy about 38 years ago. Joy is the mother of five children, and her journey with motherhood really led her into just discovering Waldorf education and what that could bring to children. So, welcome to the podcast, Joy. Great to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's always nice to have someone who I know and who's a friend as well. So it's great. It's great to have you. Yeah, so Joy, I think it's always great to start off with just a little bit about your journey with anthroposophy and how you came to it. And I know it's tied up a lot with motherhood, so I'd love to hear a little bit about that and how you ended up, knowing so much about early childhood and then helping parents and teachers as well.
Well, I suppose I ran a lot of courses for parents in time. I started, first of all, moving with my husband away from London. We both came from London, and we'd had fairly conventional type of education. But having said that, in my own primary school, it was very influenced by Eric Froebel. There was the Froebel Institute, and Eric Froebel was a contemporary of Maria Montessori and Rudolf Steiner. And in my particular girls' high school, we, in our early childhood, I went to school from about 4.5, same school right the way through. And in the junior school, it was very influenced by Eric Froebel's feeling that children should be in nature. And I couldn't have been a better candidate for that because I lived most of my life outside. And if not outside, playing imaginary games inside. I was the youngest of four myself. I was very different from the rest of my family, and was a little bit confusing for my own mum. And this particular type of way of having lots of our lessons outside, doing lots of artwork, clay work, basketry, many things which don't happen now, learning poetry by heart, lots of singing every day. Before internet and anything was recorded, it was all live. They had a live teacher playing the piano, and we would sing every morning. We'd have movement to music. Sometimes she would play beautiful Eric Satie, gymnopedy, or she'd play beautiful things, and we would just be in our pants, no no tops, all girls school, and we'd just be dancing expressively to music. It's for my favorite lesson, that and learning poetry and singing. So I had quite a lot of ill health as a child, so I experienced what it was like to feel you got a bit left behind. And I think I developed quite a deep dream world, sort of daydreaming world, if you like, because of my ill health, having tonsil trouble, hearing troubles, I developed this deep inner world. And at the time, of course, I didn't do terribly well at school. I get reports which weren't very great. And all my rest of my family, my brother and sister, were very good at school, and I was the dreamy one. So always could do better, and seems to wander off concentration, that sort of thing. But it's interesting because in retrospect, I see that as something that helped preserve my inner world, my inner being, was in a way not consciously switching off, but drifting off from things which I found too intellectual. And it wasn't a super intellectual word, none of the testing that goes on now with my grandchildren. And it was very gentle, really, run by old spinsters from the First World War who had no teaching training. It was a really unusual sort of setup in the 60s. Anyway, skip a whole lot. And my husband and I met when we were young, and we had our children when we were young. I was 22 and had our first, and we had 5 children, 3 boys and 2 girls. And although I had been to art school for 4 years, done a degree, and I really loved being creative, I felt I just couldn't do my artwork and really be attentive as a mother. And with my husband having a physical job, he was given up doing languages and become a tree surgeon. I felt, well, I will be at home, but if I'm going to enter motherhood, I'm going to do it 100% and dedicate myself to that and to experience what it is to be a mother. And I had been fortunate my mum had been like that and had really enjoyed it, although I was the fourth one. And I think she was a bit tired by the time I came along after my two brothers. So I think she was looking for something else herself. So I do remember feeling, I mean, I didn't, obviously, as a child, you adapt to whatever you have, you think that's normal. But when I became a mum in very different circumstances, in a way, didn't have friends nearby, didn't have any family nearby. We really had to, I had to dig deep for my own resources. And my husband sometimes worked away to earn money for us as for our first home. And so I found myself with three and then four, and then we moved house and then five children, quite a lot of time just on my own. And so I did the things that I loved, and I hope that they got a lot from it. But I fell back on all this creativity and imaginative world that I'd had as a child myself. And telling stories, making up stories, building dens. I'd learned the piano and the flute at school and done grades, but actually I couldn't play anything just by heart. So I thought I'm going to start doing that, and so I learned lots of folk songs. I had a good ear, and I just made up my own accompaniments. And so we used to sing a lot at home when they had birthday parties with friends. It was always live music. My husband would play the guitar, or I'd play that, and we'd have lots of percussion so the children could join in. Anyway, so in a way, I was sort of forming a kindergarten, unbeknownst to me. Never even heard of a Waldorf kindergarten. But myself had been, my early years were called kindergarten. That's what they were in the 60s. So yeah, we had a lot of art materials as well. We had clay. Yeah, so then people started saying, "Oh, when's your little boy starting school?" And I thought, "School? Who's in school? You know, he's only little. Surely he's not going to school yet." And I was, again, a bit in another world, like I am, as my mum used to say, a bit off with the fairies. So I thought, school, what school? What should I be doing something about this? So I went with Joseph, my eldest. We went to a little play group, and I thought, this is terrible. It's got little children with bicycles, tricycles whizzing around, and the parents sitting drinking coffee, very unfriendly. I thought, well, I'm definitely not going there again. And I had very strong feelings about what I didn't like. And then he started at a little village school, and which I thought would be nice. He's a very sensitive, artistic child. I know lots of mums say that little boys are sensitive and they're little hoodlums, really. And he was a bit of a hoodlum, but he was also very sensitive. You only had to look crossly at him and he cried. So anyway, that didn't work out. There was a bully in his class, which it wasn't addressed. They just turned a blind eye to it, even in this little school. So, and my daughter, his younger sister, I just had two at the time. She said, "Mummy, why is he going there? He doesn't like it." And I thought, yeah, why is he going there? So I took him out and homeschooled him for a while, but he missed company. He missed other children. And we had some very nice little girls who lived down the road who used to come and play. They were 9-year-old girls are just great when you've got little ones because they love playing with them. Anyway, so then my husband, who was a tree surgeon, got to know somebody else whose children went to the Bristol Waldorf School. And that was our first ever hearing of the word Waldorf school. And he said, I think we might like this for our children. Why don't we go along? They have open evenings. We could go there. So we did. I can't remember who we left the children with, maybe our neighbor. And it was like the door had been open on this beautiful garden. I just thought, why didn't I know about this before? Why didn't anybody tell me about this? And we both felt this was really right for our children. Now, my husband, not so much. He was actually did very well at school. He was super clever, but he's quite an anarchist. So he hates authority and people sort of dominating anybody. He came from actually quite a rough but very intelligent grammar school in London. And it was us and them, the pupils against the teachers, and they were beaten, they're caning. It was barbaric. So he just felt you've got to be strong, got to stick it to the man, sort of thing. And he liked the fact that it was very individual, very non-competitive. It was about children being themselves. And I think I was very drawn, as mums often are, to the beauty, the gentleness, and the artwork, just really as an artist myself, I just thought this is wonderful, that this is free expression, even if they're all painting a yellow circle with a blue surrounding it in class 1. So I became very interested. We went to another interview, and then we signed up for the children to go, which was completely mad because I was just about due our 5th baby. And so my husband used to take the elder 2 children off there for the first few weeks, and then I had to do it with baby and toddlers in the back. And it was quite a long journey. And I became so interested. I thought that maybe I could train myself as a kindergarten teacher. And tragically, at the time the children, our eldest 2, had started, the upper school closed. And so Joseph, our eldest, who was already 10 at the time, would only have another couple of years and then would have to change again. And unfortunately, his year group was a difficult one. You get it, this happens. You have year groups which are very shy and quiet. You have others which are very obstreperous and demanding. And that's the spirit of the class. And his was very demanding, quite boy heavy, and the teacher who was, I'm afraid, had favorites. And it wouldn't have been any better if Joseph had been the favorite or not. That environment is really wrong for children when you have an adult who favoritizes anybody. And so he felt that he wanted to do what everyone else did. I would say that the discipline in the school, the Waldorf school at the time, was not great. And there were a few teachers who had been asked to leave. These things happen in every school. It's not just a Waldorf school, but when it's a Waldorf school, you get to know about it all the fine details, which you never do in a state school. And our children have grown up with a bit of some with more Waldorf than others because we don't live near a Waldorf school. So I decided, which was really crazy, to set up my own little school with a friend. Not really what you do when you just had your 5th baby, but anyway, I was always like a different person, That was me in my 30s. So we asked some teachers to come from Bristol very kindly, and they came to talk about the education. We started to get a group of parents interested, and we started our own school. And I was a kindergarten teacher, and I did the training in London part-time. And then my friend, we gradually got more teachers, and it grew quite quickly, too quickly, really, that it had about 52 children. and I had about 20 of them, 21 in my kindergarten, and I absolutely loved it. And I realized then that actually my main teachers had been my own children. The training had given me an understanding of child development in a more specific way, which I maybe couldn't have put into words in the same way. But at heart, it was just reaffirming what I had observed already in my own children, the different temperaments, the different manner in which they were enthusiastic or non-enthusiastic about food, the best ways to approach them if you weren't happy with what they were doing. Some it was head on, some it was sort of round the back door. So I felt it was a very good way round. It's a bit like the old way of learning to be a nurse, is that you worked on the wards with people who weren't well, and you did your training after that first year. So that's how I really felt I learned. And I think we all do. We all learn from our children. Nobody can tell you what being a parent is going to involve. And you learn about yourself, you learn about your, which was another thing that I learned in the Waldorf training, is that when you have difficulties with a child, you must look to yourself. So the big, if you're finding there's a friction of personality, you have to really go to sleep thinking of that child and how am I not meeting them? Why am I finding this particular type of behavior so difficult? And that is the loving, important, significant way of being around children. To be authoritarian in the way that, you know, I'd been brought up. Not so much children are seen and not heard, but that, you know, you don't ask questions or don't answer back or don't be cheeky, all these things that people say to you. And that in a Waldorf school, children are very questioning. We want them to ask questions. We embrace that. So I really loved that. And I found it was very hard work. I found it very hard work meeting the needs of the parents, because again, the generation had moved on. I wasn't a young parent. I had now teenagers, and my youngest was, well, the youngest two were in my kindergarten. But already you're having others who are having their first time babies. So you're realizing the world is changing. It's still pre-internet, you know, digital world. So yeah, that's how I began in this sort of muddly way. Yeah. Yeah.
Muddly way,
Muddly
mother
way, yes.
motherly way,
Motherly muddle.
muddly.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Starting a school with when you've got five or about to have five children and then having five children. Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, it's a big job.
Mm.
Um, so many different questions came up. I wrote a few things down, but one was so you were lucky enough to have a very artistic early education yourself, early life. So, you know, with movement and with music and artistic work. There's this conception out there that a lot of people have about the Waldorf movement and about the Steiner movement in general, that the schools, that the artistic work and the artistic life for young children is there, so it's going to produce artists, or, you know, that it's not really fostering their intellectual development. And so people think, oh, you know, no, they learn to read later and they don't start doing certain things until later. I think my child's much more intellectual. I think I'm going to put them into a mainstream school. So maybe could you speak to that a little bit, that
Yeah.
why, what is it that's good for a child about the arts, about movement, about music? Why is that there?
And nature, The
nature.
most important teacher is the natural world, being out in nature. Yes, I'm happy to talk about that. One of the things, and I said, I had a feeling for Waldorf education before I even had met it, is how he articulates that children develop in 7-year cycles, and that we go on, carry on right throughout our life. And now with people living into hundreds, we have many more 7-year cycles. And that's to do with complex things you could go into as deep or as shallow as you like, to do with being sun beings and living in the day and night and our seasons and we've ordered 7 days of the week, and 7 is a magic number in fairy tales, like 3 is as well in other ways. And you find the 3 and the 7 pops up with quite a lot of what Rudolf Steiner brings up, the thinking, feeling, and willing. And this 7-year cycle, and the first 7-year cycle, which is the sort of fertile ground that the tree that is that individual child grows up in, needs its full time. Every little bit of time you take away from that in intellectualism or in academia or in things which are not where the child is, he talks about not just having a detriment for the child in the first 7 years, but way into their future, into their 50s and 60s, that illnesses that people have, sclerotic illnesses, hardening of the arteries, arthritis, multiple sclerosis, all these things which we are seeing more and more of, not just because we're living longer, but actually are coming early in an earlier age, are to do with how we brought our children up in the first 7 years. And many of the accusations are saying, well, he lived 100 years ago, 1862 to 1925, it's a long time ago, world is very different. Yes, but Rudolf Steiner had a capacity to really foresee trends and developments that were starting now, were already in the past or centuries ago, and how they were going to unfold. That is something I really began to grasp, that I was reading the lectures of somebody who had deeply thought about what it is to be human, what it is to be alive on the earth, how we are formed and affected by the planets and the cosmos around us, and linking it in a beautiful way. So I think, getting back a long way around to your question, that the first 7 years need to have their full 7 years. And I was very fortunate. I managed to convince all the parents that I taught to not send their children before time to another form of school, because unfortunately, after 7 years, we didn't have a permanent home. We kept on having to move to school. And so often children, sometimes parents did go to a Waldorf school, or they had to go, if they weren't moving house, they had to go to a state or private school. So really what I spoke about is how in the first 7 years, the child has this wonderful gift of fantasy and imagination. And that is not just a sort of fun little byproduct of being a child. It's actually there for a reason, that the child's work is play. That's how they learn. And it's whether they play on their own, or whether they play with each other, or play out in natural world, digging holes, playing with water. It's not, also very importantly, it's not adult organized games. And we have moved in my lifetime, I was allowed to play childlike games at my school. And now it only happens at playtime when everybody's going wild. And you know, there's footballs and there's monkey bars and there's all sorts of things there. But, you know, it's about sort of letting off steam because they've been having to learn and doing head work. And Steiner says, don't do the head work. In fact, most of the rest of the world, and certainly on the continent, don't go send their children to school before the year they're going to be 7. So in the UK, in the US, say, we are the odd ones out that we do things that way. And we need to look at the history of the United Kingdom and its past record with children. Children were seen and not heard. Children were hit with sticks if they did things wrong, or sent to their room without any food. Children were dressed as little adults, and the children that were deemed as good children were ones that behaved like little adults. So you had many, many years of repression. This happened around Europe as well, actually. and some therapists and analysts think that's possibly why the problems of the First and Second World War happened, was because there was a real environment and normality about violence towards children. So Rudolf Steiner was really thinking completely new, radical way, not only of giving children their voice and letting them play for all this length of time, that the teacher should work on creating the right environment so the children could sort of pour out their being into the environment, that they felt so at home and so at ease that they could paint, they could draw, they could sing, they could build houses, pretend to be astronauts or doctors or whatever they want in their play. And that when they went outside, this could flow out into nature, that nature became their friend, which is nature had been for me as a child, because I spent a lot of time out in it as well. But that the different trees and the leaves and the seasons, and picking blackberries, that you don't have you have blackberry jam when the blackberries are ripe, and you have apple pie when the apples are ripe, and you have everything has its time. And that rhythm is what makes a child feel happy and invited and welcomed into the world. And I saw this happen not just with my own children, but with other people's children, that when I established this rhythm, the yearly rhythm, the seasonal rhythm, the weekly rhythm of a different activity, main activity for each day. And now you might say, well, you decided the activity, that's adult in, you know, input into what the children do. But what you're creating is the possibility for them to make bread every week, paint every week, do sewing every week, or we do have a tidying up day where we polish with linseed oil or wax all the wooden toys, or we have a real tidy up outside, and we have a great big bucket full of soapy water, and the children will clean all the saucepans and buckets and spades that they've used in the sandpit, and we have a big you know, or we'd have like cleaning up would be washing all the dollies' clothes. That is great highlight in the summer with all these bowls of soapy water and the children hanging out the dollies' clothes outside. I mean, it's so lovely. So this idea of, in this time of the year that we're in now, of putting all the seed babies to sleep in the garden. You know, if we've collected conkers, we might make a little bed and we put them in the ground. And then it was so lovely in the spring, we come back after Christmas, and lo and behold, bit by bit, little shoots would be wiggling out, and they'd be little trees. And that would be the activity in the spring, is going and planting those little baby conker trees out somewhere on a walk. Now, the fact that maybe they got eaten or dug up, or, you know, we went to a field where there were cows and the children really wanted to plant, so we planted, and then they weren't there. They weren't interested. What they loved was that they'd grown it, they'd planted it, and that they were the division between them and the natural world was totally one. There was no division. And what I experienced, which was a surprise to me, that some of the children, as you can imagine, love being at very energetic, very warm children, you know, outdoor play was their favorite time of the day or the morning. But I had two little children who really struggled with walking. Their mum and dad didn't take them for walks. They were always bundled up with layer upon layer of clothes. And I thought you know, when they were about to leave, they were leaving to live in America. And I said, they asked me round for lunch, which is really lovely. And I said, so what do you think you will remember as your favorite part of kindergarten? And honestly, you could have blown me over. They said it was the walks. And I thought, isn't that interesting? It wasn't the thing that they found easy, the singing, the music, the painting, very artistic, musical children. It was a thing they found hard, which is being out in the snow, because I used to take them out, whatever the weather was, snow, rain, thunderstorm, you know, we went out in anything. And but they loved it, but it was hard for them. And I've often thought of these two children who now will be in their mid-30s, thinking, I wonder if that's something they've held on to now. I had that experience when I was little. They won't necessarily remember me or where they were, but that something I find hard, if I really engage with it, I then discover I really gain something from that connection. Now, that to me is learning, is a real education, that it's not about I just do the things I'm good at or I find easy. I actually go into something with interest. And it might be really hard for me. I mean, not to say that I'm ever going to study maths because I'm so hopeless with numbers, but that I can go into something with this sense of inquiry and I gain riches for life from there. So that's my roundabout way of answering your question. Yeah.
That's really great, actually, because I was actually going to ask about rhythm, the importance of rhythm in the kindergarten, and you explained it beautifully, because I actually worked in a kindergarten myself for a little while, and it was every Thursday, I think, and Thursdays was pumpkin soup day. So I was the pumpkin, this big giant that came in on Thursday and helped make pumpkin soup.
Mr. Pumpkin
And
Soup.
yeah, and you know, it was unbelievable, just the joy in those children, and watching the not just the rhythm of the day, but the rhythm of the, as you said, the seasons, and the rhythm of the week. You know, Thursdays was pumpkin day, and everything was sort of orange, and you know, we sang songs while we cut up the pumpkins. And I used to, that used to freak me out a little bit, because the Waldorf kindergarten teachers really allow for quite a lot of risk. I
Yeah,
found, so children allowed to
yeah,
climb trees and hurt themselves and go outside
yeah.
and
Use knives, proper
use knives.
knives.
So they actually had proper knives, and they were cutting up the pumpkins. And at first, I was like, "Whoa, okay, I don't know if I can," but they were so skillful. And
Yeah,
I think someone maybe had a little cut once, but
yeah,
that's how you learn, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, and the rhythm of the day always used to really amaze me, because the teacher would or the kindergarten, is it a teacher? Do you say teacher? I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
I know you do, but if that I don't know what you
So
should be
she would
called.
sing a particular song at a particular time. So this was, you know, just before eating, it was the washing your hands song, and the children would just all stop what they were doing. They'd
And
pack up the
leap up
toys
again.
and they'd leap up and go wash their.
Yeah,
And we
yeah,
started doing that with our own children as well. You know, having particular songs for particular times of day.
yeah. It's a gift. It's an absolute gift, isn't it? To
Absolutely.
change the spoken word to the singing word, and how children respond to that, and also to gesture. I mean, this is what the training is really about, is about your inner being, how you are inside is the teaching ingredient for the child. You can say and do. I witnessed some kindergartens because in my training I had to go and sit in and with other teachers, and I witnessed sometimes teachers who were really good at doing all the crafts, but when it came to the singing, the ring time, none of the children joined in. And then you go to somebody else, and she wasn't necessarily singing in tune, but the children all were singing away heartily. Now, what was that? What were they imitating? The second teacher's voice was really out of tune, and the first teacher's voice was beautifully in tune. One, the children were imitating, the other, the children weren't imitating. What is it they're imitating? They're imitating the teacher's love of what they're doing. So when you love what you do, the children then want to do it with you. That's really sums up everything in kindergarten. If you love it, if you don't love painting, if you don't, like one teacher I worked with didn't like going outside in the rain. She said, oh, it's just a cold nose day, we'll just go out for a bit. Then the children learn to say, oh, I don't like this weather, I don't like that weather. You go out in anything, you find it fun. You see that it's fun playing in the puddles. You see it's fun sliding down in the snow. And yes, you get a bit cold, but then it's lovely snuggling up for a story in the warm when you get back. So it's really, and that's what I found, which is different from a family being in this bigger group of children, that when you have this warm family-like atmosphere, and they used to think I slept at kindergarten. They used to say, where's Joy's bed? And we've never found your bed, Joy. Where do you sleep? I didn't have another life. That was it. That's where I was. That when it's so warm, they really bond like brothers and sisters. And like brothers and sisters, they squabble and they fight about things. But when you, like in a loving family, everybody is important. Even the very disturbed child. And I had a few, not many, one or two, very disturbed children, that they're all welcome. And that's hard. It's hard for the other children, hard for the parents to have their child go into a class with maybe one other child who can be a bit violent, can be unpredictable. And that's tough. But what I loved in the Waldorf way is that a parents' evening was when all the parents came, and you talk about the group as a whole. And you had time, I certainly made time for individual meetings with parents, because but for the parents, the children won't be there. Lots of teachers say, oh, give me the children any day, but the parents, oh, they're a nightmare. Now, that's a terrible thing to say in my mind, because but for the parents, you wouldn't have the children. And they are entrusting you with their most precious gift, their child. So demanding as it can be, and some can be quite aggressive. So I've had all sorts, but I saw it as my job. I had one father who said, I play cricket, I play football with my sons. Why don't you do it at school? What sort of school do you call this? It was really going for me. But fortunately, I had boys of my own, and I was very familiar with what it was like. My own brothers were very much in prep school. Everything was about sport. And I managed to win him over. And I had to have a discussion in the car park through the window of the car. He wouldn't even get out and come into the kindergarten. I see that as part of the teacher's job. And part of the teacher's job is to explain to the parents in a way they can understand why it's important to give the children the amount of time to unfold in their own way and to trust. And I think actually you do in kindergarten, it's a bit easier because they start to bring this warm and loving behavior home. They start to say, can we have a candle when we have mealtime? Can we hold hands and sing blessing on the meal? I can help you chop up and make supper, or I can do that. I can tidy up. Some of the parents, I remember one dad saying to me, I never realized how much I had to learn about how to be a parent, but I'm getting it from my child, how to do my job better. Isn't that lovely? Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it actually, so it starts to actually bring a gift into the home as well. It's not just
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what I became more interested in when I had to stop teaching. After 14 years, my husband got very seriously ill. He was better, but it took about 4 years. And I thought, I need to be at home with him. I had always said, when I I'll stop teaching, and then we can have holidays, not just in school, because having five, you've got a long time of only going in the school holidays. And it would be nice because we love being in nature. And in those days, didn't realize the terrible effects of traveling by plane and going abroad, which we do now. But anyway, so I stopped teaching. But what I did carry on with was my courses that I'd set up for parents, because I felt actually by the time they're 3.5, 4, they've already had 3.5, 4 years in an environment that's probably not been anything like a Waldorf environment. Most people in the UK don't have a clue. They don't now either, even 100 years later, they don't know what Waldorf is or Rudolf Steiner. So it felt very important. I ran a parent and child group at the same time as doing the kindergarten. And when I stopped, I felt I really want to carry on with these courses, which were bringing this 7-year stages of development. I was bringing puppet shows for each of the seasons and teaching the parents how to do puppet shows. We would do ring times, again, seasonal songs that they could sing them with their children, craft activities, whether it was bread making or whittling or making dolls or whatever it was, wet felting, all the sorts of things that are lovely to do with children, but also fundamentally about the day to day. That the child, Rudolf Steiner said, the time will come when children won't learn about how to be in a home at home because both parents will be working, that they will learn about home through kindergarten. And that's why the kindergarten needs to be like a home, not a school, that you are like a mum or a dad. Or sometimes if you have older children coming in, which I did when I was working as part of a bigger school, sometimes the older students as teenagers would come in and do some help, or they do their work experience would be a week in kindergarten. And so that they were like big brother or big sister, which was really lovely. And that it was life. They're learning about how to get themselves dressed, how to help someone else get dressed if they got all muddy, or how to, if you've hurt somebody and you push them over and you feel sorry about it, even though you're angry, that you come and you go and get the cream and you put it on their knee to make them better, that you take hold of your responsibility, not just for yourself, but in a loving way to everybody else around you. Now that makes for a better world in my mind. If we could all do that in life, if we all went back to kindergarten and all learned those lessons there, to share your food, or you can come and sit next to me, or, somebody said, I don't want to hold your hand. They do say things like that. I'm going to sit next to a girl, or, all this thing. And I said, we're all little birds in one nest. And there are boy birds and there are girl birds, and we're all friends together. And then we say, now, can a boy go and find a little girl to stand? And so we just change it around. Or everybody with blue slippers on, hold hands, and everyone with brown slippers on, you just muddle it up in an imaginative, and then forget about, I don't want to hold her hand. It's all about the slippers then. So that's what I love about the little ones, is that it takes very little to take them into their imaginary world, and then they're all little mice, or they're all pussycats, or they're all little fish in the sea. And so this way of working, where fantasy and reality is very mixed, is actually where the teacher there's no need for shouting, because you can use so many tools like a Pied Piper to entice them in, like you say about the washing up song. Yeah, beautiful, isn't it?
Well, that's really nice. And I think, but it's also, you're obviously gifted in that way. And I think the better, or the really good kindergarten teachers are, and teachers in general, sort of have a gift for that, because especially early childhood, if you haven't got that creative thinking on your feet, hold hands with everyone with blue slippers on, you know what I mean? It took me a long time. My children taught me how to do that, and it took me a long time. I didn't get it straight away.
Yeah.
So I think it's really special when you've got a kindergarten teacher who can do that. Just come up
It's
with
got to be
something.
just like that
It has
too.
to be just like that. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
got no warning, it's going to
It's
happen.
too late if you haven't come up with it straight away. That it's too late. You've lost the game. But
Yeah.
what I was just thinking then was, I think my wife and I, we do a similar thing. We have a group for the parents at the school where our children go, and to try and just bring some more understanding about why the school does certain things at certain ages. Um, what do you say to parents, or because there's so much pressure on parents these days, and of course maybe there always has been, but a lot of the time both are working. They just don't really have that time to make the home like a home. Our ideal was always like that as well, to have our home like a Waldorf kindergarten. We tried, we did our best, but what what can parents do? What would you say to parents that they can start to do just on a baby step level?
Yeah. Well, if you have made the decision that you just having 6 weeks, 6 months, a year maternity leave, and you're going back to your job, and that is the reality, is, many, that's the norm now, that the people that you choose to leave your children with have an understanding that they're not going to put them in front of the television, that the food they give and the food they prepare, they do it with the children, that you are really choosy about who your child is with. So that, if that's what you're going to do, and it could be that they're with granny or granddad or auntie or uncle, but it more than likely will be somebody who you're paying to do it. And there are not that many Waldorf childminders or childcare. But really make sure that you are happy and don't put up with second best for your children. The children adapt. Children are born to adapt, like puppies and kittens and all young animals. But what becomes missing, and there's a lot of talk about this at the moment, is about attachment and attachment problems. So if the person isn't warm and loving, and the other children that are there don't seem really happy and rosy and healthy and are messy, I think a good early childhood thing, the children get dirty. Mustn't be clean, in my point of view. To be happy as a child, they should be mucky by the end of the day. And I think that's the first thing. And I think also that you maybe think about, firstly, and I know my own children who are adult and are parents now too, that you maybe juggle your time so that one is there for them in the morning, one is there for them in the afternoon, and that maybe you have a childminder who comes to your house when they're little, because the home is the child's sense of self. The home is synonymous with their sense of security. So when parents separate, which a lot of parents do, that's the reality. When the children are younger, especially if there are older children in the family, you might have the youngest in your care, that you form good relationships with both parents, and that the child ideally can stay in the home where they are used to living. When that goes away, it's like all stability goes, and then you have a really traumatized child in kindergarten. So it's really about talking about this to the parents if they're separating, talking about them. I'm going to work, so I won't be able to come to any of the festivals. I won't be able to come to any of the things that you invite parents in. I used to have like on Friday afternoons that parents came to the choir, and we teach them the songs we've learned in kindergarten. So that maybe you have somebody else who comes in for you, so that there's like this known close representative for the child who is there for them on a regular basis. The problem is with paying people to look after your child is they change. So you have a nanny and you may have somebody they'll have somebody different every year. So that's hard for them. On a day-to-day basis, I would say make sure that you're not so tired that when you come home and, hopefully if they finish their school day at 3 or 4, that they're not going to yet another person before they come home. There are children that have so much. They go to school, they're there from 8 in the morning, sometimes till 5:30, 6, and they've seen other children come and go. I saw one little girl in a kindergarten. She was aged 5, and she came to breakfast club. She was there right to the very, very end. She saw children go at lunchtime, children go at 3 o'clock, and then she was the one little one left on her own because both parents were working. And she cried every single day. And yeah, we live in a time when women are free to have choice, to do what they want to do. Their bodies are their own. But who is there for the child? You don't have to have children. So who is there to care for the child? And it's really important that you and your partner, or if you're a single parent, that you talk with maybe your mum and dad or close friends and I've known 2 women who didn't have husbands, and they lived together with their children, and they really made sure that they were each there for each other's children. If one wasn't there, the other one was. So what is really hard, and you are going to do not necessarily damage when they're 6, 7, or even 12, 13. You might be looking at illnesses that come in your late 40s, 50s, heart attacks. Why heart attacks? Because your heart's been broken. There's been nobody there for you when you were little. High blood pressure. I'm in a state of panic. I don't know where my mummy is. I don't know where my daddy is. I'm there all day, every day without them. Now, on the face of it, they seem all right, but you don't know what's happening to their heart, their liver, their lungs, their spleen, their stomach. This is what Steiner talks about, how everything we do in the first 7 years has an effect on the physical organs of the child. So you won't see it. It's inside our body. So it's deep. It's difficult to experience what that really means, what he's saying. That if, we know when we're in panic, we go, our breathing is very shallow. So then we have breathing problems. You may be asthmatic anyway because you've inherited that from your ancestral stream, but you have this tendency to be scared, I can't quite cope. I can't quite breathe into life. So that has consequences, so that maybe you experience panic attacks, anxiety later in life. Now, you might say, well, life is hard. It's never going to be perfect. No, it's not. We're not living in paradise, but we can do the best we can so that the child can breathe really well. And breathing isn't just about the air quality or, what is the fad, is about allergies to foods, this, that, and the other, but it's about breathing into life. That I can go out in the rain, that I can go and play in the mud, that every time I come in the door, Joy's always got a smile on her face for me. That when I left stopped teaching, this one little boy apparently said to the following up teachers, well, who's going to rub my tummy when it hurts if Joy's gone. Because in those, maybe you can't do it now, but if some child has a tummy ache, they'd come on my knee and I'd rub their tummy, and it makes it better. I know it does. One little boy who was very little melancholic with his little hood up all the time and his little world, didn't really notice very much around him. He said to the teacher who followed me, he said, what's happened to that funny lady? This was 3 months after I'd left. Did you know that one with the curly hairs, always smiley? And she said, oh, Joy, she went a long time ago, So children they are on a different time length to us. They're on a different wavelength to us. They experience the world through all their senses, which we don't when we're adults. We were children, but it's often a long time since we were a child when we become a parent. So we have to re-experience what that might be like from their point of view. And I think all the digital, all the phones and the tablets and the screens, I think it's the questions parents ask me about when I was doing the courses all the time. Sorry, I'm just going to turn my own phone off because someone's phoning about our internet being off. And I think it is about, you don't give a child whiskey. You would have no qualms about that. It's not good. You wouldn't give a child a cigarette. And now we're sensible enough to not have smoking in the environments where children are. But we give a really addictive thing like this little square box.
Yeah.
And they are addictive, and they're meant to be addictive, and they're made to be addictive. And they have all sorts of things on them which are fun and waste a huge amount of time. And we adults know it. So to say, no, that's for when you're older, is absolutely fine. Don't feel worried about it. Parents in my class, it was televisions, it was screens. I say, put a cover over it, put a curtain over it. And that's for when you're older. We're far too busy, we've got far too many things to do. Sometimes I say, put it up in your attic. None of you watch it. And you'll suddenly find you do a lot more together as a family. And you'll discover, a dad might start to do this is sounding a bit sexist, because women do wood whittling as well as men. But the dad might find, oh, actually, I used to really like doing this when I was a child, making bows and arrows and making targets. Or maybe I can build the children a sandpit and they can help me. Or maybe we can make a little wild area in the garden. We can plant bulbs in the autumn, that will come up each year. That you discover new facets of yourself as a parent. It's not about taking them to a club to learn to swim or do gym or go horse riding. What they want is their connection with you. That's what's important. And now with AI coming in, AI that could end up teaching children in schools instead of human beings, we're really being tested here. How much is human connection important? How much does a child need another human child to be with, let alone as I've had, our cats had kittens, and I've had the grandchildren over, and they just adore them to death. The kittens are being very good. But, the connection with animals that children have, where do they have the opportunity for that? To pick up a chicken, to collect the eggs, to feel that warm egg that's just come out of a chicken's bottom. All these wonderful experiences, which I think should be in a kindergarten. Really, it should be like a little farm, so that they're getting all their food there, their milk there, their fruit, everything is seen and grown, the wool from the sheep. In fact, we used to collect the sheep wool from the barbed wire, or we go and see the farmer shearing the sheep, and then we wash it and make it in things. I think if parents can take these real life skills, like the washing up, the tidying up, That's making our bed nice each night, putting the clothes out for the morning. If we take time to do it beautifully, then it still is a shame if you're not there with your children, but at least you are really developing this, doing something with love. Doesn't have to be a special paid activity. It's just the everyday chores of the home, laying the table beautifully. Let's go out and get some lovely leaves to put on the table around the candle we're going to light. It can be about washing up and doing it, putting on the dry. And yes, okay, the floor gets soaking wet and the child has to wear an apron and it takes half an hour instead of 10 minutes. But what they're learning is, my mummy, my daddy always has time for me. And when they're ill, I mean, we immunize children so that they won't get ill, so that we won't be able to, we can go to work full time and we never have days off for ill children, because that's really part of the drive towards having children completely immunized by everything, is so nobody has time off work. That's the hidden agenda there. But what do you learn when you're ill as a child? My mother or my father takes care of me. When I'm really hot or my throat's swollen or I can't breathe properly, they're always there for me, making me better. It's true when we say I'll kiss it better, only when you're under 7 years old can you kiss a child better. Doesn't happen later. Your 15-year-old certainly doesn't want you to kiss them better, but so I think it's really a challenge for parents to find this way to be present, not be tired, not be ratty, not think, oh, it's much easier if let's just take you to ballet class. Let's just take you to football. Because then again, I'm not doing anything. I'm just taking you there. So it's about prioritizing whilst the children are little, and not little for very long, particularly the first 7 years. Is there a way I can adapt what I do and have a longer term view, which is interestingly part of what Rudolf Steiner says in our cycles of life? We are divided into childhood being the sanguine time of life, when we're open and excited about everything around us. And that the middle period of our life is the choleric. We're going out in the world and we're asserting ourselves and we're earning money and we're being a bit more cutthroat about things. And then we're also then moving into the phlegmatic time of life when we see the long-term view. So can we behave as adults that see the long-term view? I don't get to do all the things I want to do now whilst my children are 3 and 4 and 5. But in 10 years' time, life will be different. I have to wait. It's delayed gratification for adults as well as children. And then in our older age, if we get there and have an real old age, it's that more melancholy time of life where we look back on the choices we made. We reflect on how we have done things. Some that were good, some that weren't good, some that we regret, some that we feel, if I had my time, I'd do that again. We want to make the choices that we feel, okay, some things I did wrong, but that bit I'm happy with. That's good. And I think the early stage, I do encourage parents, if they can at all possibly, to really think about, before they have their children, how are we going to manage it? I think a lot of the problems happen because they find themselves in a situation, think, help, I don't know what to do. And it's just a quick decision's made and the child seems okay. Phew, that's a relief. So I can go back to work full time. And it's not really thought through in the best way. So I just really encourage parents to talk about it, think about it, and imagine themselves being the child suddenly, after being at home, to suddenly having to go out every single day and what that feels like. Yeah.
Well, there's so much in there, Joy. That was beautiful. One thing that occurred to me as you were speaking then was, you mentioned that children are sort of in this different state, like on a different plane in a way, especially young children. And one of Steiner's lecture series to teachers about child development is called The Kingdom of Childhood. And I always think that that's a really nice way to think that they're in this kingdom, and it's like that kingdom needs protecting. It needs looking after. It needs some boundaries around it, and so it needs a lot of support. I just want to ask one last question, if I could.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for for everything you've shared. When it comes to, so maybe parents listening to this might think, well, that's easy to say, no, don't be tired, and it's easy to say, have time for this and have time for that. But I wonder if there's a way. So the word that comes to mind is presence. So being present when we are with the children, and also the other word you used was having interest. So I think sometimes it feels too overwhelming to think, oh, I've got to do this with them and take them here and learn how to whittle wood or whatever, those sort of things. I think they're all beautiful things, but what would you say about that, about being present and being interested, and how the importance of those things?
Well, say for instance, say you come back late. Say I all these things I'm saying to you now, I have done. They're part of my life, what my husband and I as a family have worked out. Now, he's not on the same page as I am, very different person to me, but together we worked as a team to provide this. So for instance, in the summertime, if you're married to a tree surgeon, they're not back till 9:30, 10 o'clock, because they're out because the daylight's long in this part of the world. And so the children, the little ones, the baby, the 3-year-old, the 6-year-old, wouldn't see them because they would be in bed. So my children had sleeps in the afternoon, so they would be up late and they wouldn't go to bed till we all had supper together. So he'd see them every day. He'd give them their bath, do the story, and he would see them every day too. We adapted it to our environment. Otherwise, they wouldn't have seen their dad. It was difficult. Sometimes he had to work away. But actually, after we had 3 children, I said, it's no good. You've got to be at home, because they were so unhappy when he was away. I couldn't, it was very hard being with 3 unhappy children because their daddy wasn't there. So, that's difficult. Again, you may have a partner who does work regularly away, but you will have to imaginatively find a way that can make it easier for them, whether it's photographs. Oh, okay. Thank you. That's my husband just saying I've got to be back by a certain time. I didn't really say that. Okay. So yes, I'm answering your question now. What can they do? Yes, you don't have to whittle. It's about the everyday things in life. So it could be about the meal, the family meal. That's the big thing. That you may say, oh, the children eat earlier and we'll have ours later. Adapt to having it all together. You have it a bit earlier. The children maybe are in their pajamas so they can go to bed. You can shift things around. I used to, if, when it was late that they had their meal, that they'd be in their pajamas, that we wouldn't have story. We'd have story maybe in the afternoon when they came back from school and had their tea, British style tea, which is toast and marmite and crumpets and that sort of thing, and a cup of tea or hot chocolate. And we'd have our supper at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, something like that. So they'd be in their pajamas, and then Daddy would go up and he would read some poems or tell them poems or make up a rhyme. So we wouldn't have a long story at bedtime. It would be a poem. Now, it's very interesting because our children really love poetry as adults. It's a byproduct of us being actually in a bit more of a hurry, and what's quicker, a poem's quicker. But you could tell a lovely poem which has got all that lovely rhythm and repetition and can be funny or can be really help them drift off to sleep. Sing them a song we never put on tapes. Okay, you say, I don't know any songs. We all know nursery rhymes, hopefully. And if you don't, maybe go and join a little group like the courses I used to run and learn some song that you can sing by heart. Because that's the thing, that's the gift, is that before you learn to read and write, you have this amazing memory where you just soak it up and you remember things so quickly. I had a child who learned 3 different languages. She came speaking German, she came and learned English in a term, and then she had a Spanish nanny and she learned speaking Spanish. 3 languages, and she was only 5. You know, so we can't do that. Why can't we do that? Because a child learns through imitation. They don't learn by instruction. And so, you know, I could talk to you for hours, but it's a completely different thing. But so to be present with your children is like when you do that, your little bedtime ritual, when you have your meal, have lots of physical contact, you know, give them a nice rub, you know, with some oil maybe at night before they go to sleep. Learn a song that they really love. And you just sing it and stroke their head until they really go off to sleep, that you're present for that maybe hour, 2 hours with them. That will make a difference, a big difference, in my mind. Yeah.
And for their whole life, most likely.
Yeah, absolutely, for their whole life. That you're never alone, that you are delivering them up to sleep, and in sleep they go off to be with the angels. Yeah,
That's a whole nother conversation.
that's
But
another
yeah.
conversation. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Joy, you've got the perfect first name for what you do, but your enthusiasm and your joy and your passion for this work and for children, I can tell how much you love children and want the best for them, all children. And it really shines through in everything you
Oh, thank
say and
you.
everything you brought today. So I think this is going to be really special for people to get to hear this and see this. So thank you very much for your time today.
That's the pleasure. I'd also just quickly like to add that parents shouldn't think they need to be their child's entertainer. Give the children the freedom to play in their own way. And there's a lot of joy and a lot of learning to be gained by witnessing how they play, rather than asking them what they do or why they're doing it or what are you pretending to be. Just watch it. That we as the adult, we say less, but watch more, watch and listen more. Don't feel you need to play with them. Create the environment that makes them this inner vitality pour forth, and then it will. Yeah. Thanks very much
Beautiful
for
advice.
inviting me.
No,
Thank you.
thank you very much. So just want to say one last thing just for people who are watching, and this is that you can actually support this podcast so that we can continue having guests and continue making the podcast available. And you can do that over at Substack. So it's substack.com/MickYoung, my name, MICKYOUNG. And that's where you can support us. And Joy, is there anywhere that you would like to send people to find out more about your work? Is there a website or anything that, if there is, I can put it in, I can link to something below?
I haven't, because I have retired now, so I'm not really running my courses anymore. But what I can do is I could give you a list of some nice books, a few, just 3 really lovely books, which I think, well, one of them is You Are Your Child's First Teacher by Rahima Baldwin-Dancy. The other one I think is really lovely is Toy Making with Children by, see, I've got that age where I forget everybody's name.
That's okay. If you send it to me, I can list it in the description. Yeah.
Caroline Heidebrand, the very first Waldorf teacher who worked under Rudolf Steiner, and her book I still think is the loveliest. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, so send those through and
I'll send those
yeah.
through. Yeah, lovely.
Okay, thanks
Okay,
again,
thank you
Joy.
so much. Lovely.
Take
Nice
care.
to speak with you. Bye bye then.
Same with you.
Bye.
Bye for now. Bye
Bye.
bye.